Look, we're going to talk to Jonathan Ayling soon from the Free Speech Union. Lots of feedback, though. And I'm glad we highlighted the H&J Smith closure, because I think in normal times it wouldn't get headlines in major media. But it is indicative of change in this country, and change that I don't think we are all comfortable or happy about. The change from a country where maybe it was a bit uptight and you went to Kirk's or you went to the department store in Smith & Co's and life had a certain cadence and structure to it, to the new world where people get shot at, where people walk into supermarkets and take what they want and walk away, whether the police aren't there on time to stop vicious beatings. One in Key Street being reported in the Herald this morning, caught on video, but the cops were just too late to get there. So we go from a world that at least in hindsight, had the impression of some level of stability and sincerity to it, to a kind of lawless future, a lawless present where the norms of society and the decency of society seems to have been abandoned in the interest of some sort of chaos. Maybe it's because there's too much disinformation. And as Ben highlighted yesterday, the government has put out, essentially a tender for a group, and it's prepared to spend up to $450,000 a year to whatever organisation comes back with a tender to provide analysis and report on disinformation about issues to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And it would be important advice that would probably form the basis of action taken by our security services and the government at a very, very high level. And Ben opined, and I think correctly yesterday, that the tender document looks absolutely custom-made so that Kate Hanna and the other pearl-clutching, hand-wringing, showering people from the Disinformation Project will walk in, get this job and get back on the taxpayer tit, spreading their disinformation, which is clearly disinformation about disinformation. And it would seem to me that the disinformation shtick of this government is part of its desire to create a climate of fear that can then be used to introduce hate speech laws. And hate speech laws, as we all know, and has been proven time and time again, hate speech laws are anti-free speech laws. That's really what they're all about. So does the government intend to continue this campaign against free speech? To find out or to get some perspective on this, we're joined, and he hasn't been with us for a while, by Jonathan Ayling from the Free Speech Union. Jonathan, how are you, mate? Nice to have you back.
Morning, Sean.
All right, you've seen this tender document. First, let's just talk about the story itself. Would you agree with Ben's analysis that this looks like basically a make-work scheme for Kate Hanna and the Disinformation Project?
Well, it certainly looks like that, not least of all because when you look at their most recent report, Recommendation 6, proposes pretty much exactly what we see being put forward by DPMC here. So about 2 weeks ago, when the most recent report was released by the Disinformation Project, we contacted our base and said they have every right to make these claims that are, frankly, intellectual waffle and pseudoscience. But we're not going to sit idly by while they do. And it appeared that Stuff had handed their pen over and said, hey, Kate, why don't you write the article for us? And now it seems like DPMC has said, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Let's get them to write the job description too.
One can presume, given its specific name, mind it did say there had to be intellectually robust and scientifically proven research methods, which the Disinformation Project don't have. They seem to come up with little graphic thought bubbles and say the rest of the research is so horrifying we couldn't show it to you.
Well, it does seem if there's going to be a credible process here where real academics get involved, they won't stand much of a chance. But let's see how this plays out, because unfortunately, even that last report, which just has the most just the most inappropriate illustrations of the use of the word genocide and comparison of all sorts of people who are simply disagreeing to Nazis. Even that report was then lauded by individuals in Internet New Zealand, I think some people from NetSafe and other outlets that really are very ideologically aligned, and they applauded the objective data and the strong academic rigor. So I'm not sure if maybe the Disinformation Project has two reports out there, and I've only seen the kiddies version, but certainly that is not what I would call intellectually rigorous.
Yeah. The other thing is, Jonathan, this is due to be decided on by July, before the election. And I feel some dis-ease at the idea that the Disinformation Project, and I'm sorry, the crap that it propagates, is going to be abroad during the time of the election campaign. Because we have a mainstream media that refuse to critique them, and their stuff is very, very emotive and designed to garner strong public reaction, even if it's false.
Absolutely. And this is something that the Free Speech Union has been talking about for some time, that we know they have more quote-unquote research coming down the pike in terms of the role of misogyny online, and I think they are very keen on getting involved in the conversation around co-governance. And I say, let Kiwis get involved in that conversation. Absolutely. You have an axe to grind in that place, Kate. Get amongst. But don't try and illustrate that anyone who disagrees with you is a genocidal maniac. It's so destructive to the social cohesion she ostensibly is in favour of trying to protect.
We also look, Jonathan, and you mentioned Internet New Zealand and NetSafe. These are organisations that, if you trace their funding and their core funding and direction, are very much aligned with the Disinformation Project through a number of charitable donations and trusts, which are all linked together.
Yes, and I understand that one of the research assistants at the Disinformation Project is currently being funded, or has in the past been funded, by a grant from Internet New Zealand. So absolutely, they're all drinking from the same pond. It's a circle, all sharing their own research and telling each other what a great job they're doing. What I would say to Kate Hannah and Internet New Zealand and the others who are sharing this pro-censorship worldview is that in reality you do not strengthen democracy by striking at its very foundations. You don't enhance social cohesion by sowing vitriolic division, and I think you will certainly never succeed in countering untruths by simplistically silencing debate. You have to strengthen democracy by doubling down on the radical idea that everyday individuals should be able to express themselves and decide together among themselves how to be governed and to live. And we build social cohesion by stimulating dialogue and building bridges, not by name-calling. And ultimately, we have to counter untruths, because that's what disinformation is. It's, I think yesterday you called it fibs.
Yeah.
It's important that we do counter errors in our society, but we must counter untruths by allowing the conspiratorial and the hateful and the deluded to reveal themselves. And Sean, it is primarily for that last reason that you will only ever hear me defend Kate Hannah's right to speak.
Yeah, and you do.
Conspiratorial.
And I try and promote it. I'd let her come on here. I'd let her come on the platform and say whatever she wanted, but she just thinks it's too scary to do that when she really shouldn't. Well, Jonathan, who's driving this? Who put this tender out, though, from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet? I might have hoped vainly that with the departure of Jacinda Ardern as Prime Minister, this sort of silliness was going to die a death.
Well, Sean, the Free Speech Union has been saying for years now that the problem with censorship is not primarily a political problem. It's not primarily a legal problem. And I think instances like this prove our thesis that if we ever thought censorship was about the Labour Party or simply about Jacinda Ardern and her words are weapons of war narrative, then we were very mistaken. The problem is Kiwis have actually fallen out of favour with the idea that we should be able to say things that others don't like. And we're losing, and I know this isn't a popular term, but this is what it is. We're losing a war for culture here, or a culture war, if you will, because as a culture, we are becoming very suspicious at best, or outright antagonistic towards the idea that expressing quote-unquote harmful ideas is a way to vent and to address them. And so while, of course, the Free Speech Union is thrilled that we were successful as we were at defeating hate speech laws, while we absolutely support efforts to counter government involvement in spaces like this, ultimately our most important work is actually in universities and schools, and that's why next week we're releasing a new report on academic freedom that shows the root of where a lot of this material is coming from. But yeah, so we
give us a hint, Jonathan. Come on, give us a hint. Where's it coming from?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, it's coming from the university. This is what we've been saying for years. It's coming from this culture-creating institution where such a large proportion of our young people and our future leaders go through this ideological factory now that teaches them exactly what to think on all the key issues.
I got to admit, Jonathan, I was at a graduation ceremony Tuesday night for Victoria University and listened to the preambles for all the doctoral awards that were being given in professorships, and God, it was wall-to-wall woke claptrap about climate change and equity and stuff like that. It really was. What was being, what was being rewarded was just so woke it wasn't funny. Yeah,
and so this is why what we've said for some time is we need to get back into the business of persuasion. And, when I sat down a few weeks back with Michael Laws following the Disinformation Project's recent report on transgender genocide, I think Michael Laws had quite a scoffing tone, to be honest, in terms of the priorities that we're setting of going toe-to-toe with people like Kate Hanna and saying we will penny up with our facts and our arguments if you do the same. And I think there's a lot of people out there who would say, ignore them, shut them down, boo them out of the scene, this is ridiculous. But actually that just fuels the polarization. And again, it's actually counter free speech because it gives them credibility. When after
but
my
the problem is,
Michael
Jonathan,
Laws,
you are getting less mainstream media coverage than Kate Hanna is, and your position is far more logically sustainable and true than Kate Hanna's. But
sure,
she seems to have the legacy media on her side.
You and I both know that 42% of Kiwis trust legacy media, which means there's a whole lot of people that are watching it and going,
bullshit.
That doesn't sit right.
Yeah. Hey, Jonathan, is there any chance that you will apply for this funding, that the Free Speech Union could be our disinformation experts? I think that'd be great.
That's something we're very much considering today, Sean.
Awesome.
I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's likely that we're going to have to deal with the burden of actually dealing with DPMC on this, because I would be shocked if, despite the incredible academics that work for the Free Speech Union and the capacity of our team, whether they would give us that money.
Hey,
So
I'd do a joint. I'd do a joint. The platform would be in. We'd support you.
Yeah. Well, Sean, just before we go, I would encourage your listeners. There are two commentators at the moment who are really discussing the Disinformation Project and illustrating why it is so dangerous. And if we want to convince the general public, like mainstream media sometimes does, that actually free speech does matter, we need to put the hard work in. And so I would say Justice David Harvey, he was one of the longest serving judges on the district court for over 30 years. He writes on Substack, The Halfling's View. And he's just done an extensive 4-part series on the Disinformation Project. And this man deserves a reward because he's read
just give me that name again, Justice David.
So, Justice David Harvey, Harvey, and he writes on Substack. The
okay,
blog
we'll
site.
get him on the platform because he sounds fascinating. Yep.
And so he deserves a reward for reading through every report and really digging, not in an inflammatory or an emotive way, systematically working through their claims on white men. And Dr. Bryce Edwards from Victoria University has also really illustrated. He shows the fact that actually this is doing incredible disservice to the threat that lies and error are in our society. And so I would credit both of them for putting a rational, persuasive view forward that I think everyday Kiwis can get behind. And when, following my last interview with you guys, Kate Hanna got in touch with me, and she said, "Oh, Jonathan, all these nasty things you've been saying about me, this just proves that constructive conversation isn't on the table with you." I went back to her and I said, "Kate, constructive conversation has never been on the table with you, because every time I've invited you to speak with me, you've pulled out. We've been on panels together and you've quit the panel because I was going to be on there. Every time we had a coffee scheduled, she cancelled it." She likes to play this game. It's gaslighting is actually what it is. She likes to play this game. That she's a reasonable commentator who's open to the conversation, but that is simply untrue. That is disinformation, and we will call that out. I know it's a somewhat obvious point, but actually there is no better name than the Disinformation Project for these guys. They say what they do on the tin, and I'll applaud them for that as well. But I think we just need to point out it's exactly what they're doing, and the government must not get behind it. They must not.
Okay, but I mean, what do you think the chances are they will get this contract, this $450,000?
Well, at first glance, it does look like it's fairly likely. But I'm too young and too naive to believe that anything's a done deal. And so that's why we sit back and we say, look, we've got some attention growing on this. Let's make this a problem politically. These people do not deserve this public money. These are would-be censors. I am 100% against cancel culture. I am 100% against censorship. But that does not mean we cannot speak out against those, our would-be censors, and call them out for their hypocritical actions. And so that's why we will be looking to put political pressure on this. We will be looking to get members of parliament on the opposition involved and hope that there is no reason we can't make this a conversation in DPMC going, actually, it's not worth giving this contract to the Disinformation Project. And then if they do get the contract, there's enough Kiwis that are tuned in, that are paying attention to go, right, we'll make this a real hassle for them.
If they do get it, and whoever gets it, because they're part of DPMC, can we really find what they're up to? Are they subject to the Official Information Act? Do they have the same level of accountability as part of DPMC or reporting to them that a normal government department would or public servant would?
To my knowledge, not as much as a normal public servant would, but absolutely they're still OIA-able. So if they were granted this contract, we would be able to look into the back workings a little bit more, at least on the areas that are done with regards to DPMC.
And I'm still...
However, Sean,
carry on.
As you pointed out, though, the relationship with the security services and, I mean, the general demise of what the OIA is today and the right of access to information in New Zealand, which is just appalling and a shocking state. I would be surprised if, because of its association with NZSIS and the like, whether we would actually get very much out of them.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, the question I have too is who decided that we needed this, who wrote this RFP and put it out there? And I'd like to know the individual involved.
Yeah, it's very consistent with the general idea that we exist in a point of time that humanity has never seen before, where people are buying into lies and it's having this disastrous effect like never before. And this is what Jacob Nshangama calls elite hysteria. And it's very ahistoric. You look at the impact of the printing press, of radio, of television, and you see that these advances in technology create great access to information, not least of all for the average person. And elites and institutions become very, very concerned by the fact that the average man now can access information that they haven't approved. And as has been pointed out many times, the term misinformation or disinformation are perhaps new words for very old concepts. And I was recently in a meeting with a senior advisor in the Department of Internal Affairs who claimed well, what you're saying about free speech just probably doesn't apply anymore, because we've never been in a situation like we are now with the internet. The rules have totally changed. And I just don't think anyone has made the case to show that that is true. I think advances in technology have always disrupted the way we communicate, and the principles of free societies have still always
remained the same. And that's, you've got to go back to your principles to know what to do. Hey, Jonathan, always a pleasure, my friend. And if you do apply for the job for this gig, we'd be supporting you. And we will talk next week too about your new report. That is Jonathan Ayling from the Free Speech Union.